Welcome, friends. Welcome back to the kitchen. Welcome back to Sunday morning and the old cookbook show. And I mean welcome back very quite literally. As much as you've seen me here every Sunday morning over the last few months, well, the last few years, but the last few months specifically since about the beginning of June, with the exception of 2 videos that I shot in August, everything that you've seen since the beginning of June was shot last winter. I needed to take some time off over the summer for myself. I had some things that I wanted to do, and most of the things that I wanted to do have to do with the airplane channel. Please go and check out the airplane channel. Julie and I are starting new adventures in the plane, discovering more of Canada, going places in Canada that you can't get to unless you have a plane, because there's so many towns and villages in Canada that are only accessible by air or by water. They don't have roads going to them. So we're going to visit a lot of those places. We're also going to visit other places and have more experiences. So we've been doing that and also working on a higher license. I've been working on my instrument rating so that we can fly in a wider variety of weather. So this is my first video back in this studio in months, and I'm sure I'm going to make lots of mistakes. So bear with me. We're going to do a recipe out of this cookbook. This is an Australian cookbook, the Schauer Cookery Book, the improved 8th edition. It's from 1939. It is from Australia, and I need my Australian viewers to help me out with a few things. I've got a few questions, and we'll get to them as we go along in the recipe. But the first question is, I notice in this section here at the front, there are a bunch of recipes for beef. And you cook the beef with bananas. Is that a thing? I mean, there's more. I mean, there's baked banana steak or prune pocket. And then over here, it's braised steak with apples, bananas, bacon, or oysters. And there was one other in here with a banana. Is that a thing in Australia? Was that just a thing in the 1920s? Was this the 1920s version of a TikTok recipe? Please tell me down below, do you eat savory steak dishes cooked with bananas? I am very curious because I've never come across that in other cookery books from other places in the world. So please drop me a comment down below if you're from Australia and let me know if that's just a 1920s fever dream or if it's actually something that still happens in 2025. Today we're going to cook something from an Australian cookbook called Brazilian stew. Not sure why it's called Brazilian stew. It is cooked in a jar. It tells you to cook it in an earthenware container, in a bain-marie, or in a jar in a bain-marie. We're going to do it in jars in a bain-marie. It's super simplistic, but I imagine that it brings great flavor. It's a slow cook. It is essentially a 1920s version of what today in North America we would call a dump and stir crockpot recipe. So in this little bowl, I need to mix up, I've got some black pepper, I've got some salt, a little bit of vinegar, and then it calls for sauce. So the recipe just calls for sauce. It doesn't expand on what kind of sauce. And my brain immediately, first thing, went to HP sauce. It's that colonial Commonwealth string that binds us all together, House of Parliament sauce. I mentioned it to someone else and they immediately went to tomato sauce. I mentioned it to someone else and they immediately went to barbecue sauce. And this is kind of a barbecue sauce, although you would never call it barbecue sauce. It's just HP or brown sauce. In the 1920s, what kind of sauce would sauce refer to? Not being Australian, not having that depth of knowledge of the past there, I don't know what kind of sauce they would be calling for. I'm going to use HP though, because I like HP. And for our American viewers, HP is surprisingly similar to A1, except it's got a little more tang and a lot less sweet. I prefer HP to A1 anyway. So we'll give that a stir. We'll mix them together. Not much at all. Now it tells me to dip the cubed beef individually in the sauce and then put in the jars. In the eyes of efficiency, I'm just going to put it in here and toss this all together and coat it. Yeah, okay, so there's Vegemite there. We are normally a Marmite household, but this is an Australian recipe. I could see Vegemite going in there for sure. Definitely, I could see... I almost said Marmite again. I could definitely see Vegemite in there. I don't know if you could cut it with the vinegar, but, you know, a little dollop of Vegemite in with the HP sauce and the vinegar would certainly make this just a flavor explosion, because you're not really adding a lot there. The vinegar is going to help, the HP sauce is going to help, but there's not much sauce on that beef. Now, I'm going to do it in 2 jars. I've got 2 Weck canning jars, just because they fit a little more nicely in this pot. I'll be able to put them in, fill it with water as a bain-marie, put the lid on, and then when I stick it in the oven for 3 or 4 hours, I'm not going to have to worry so much about the water boiling off or evaporating. So, 2 Weck jars, and if you're on the other side of the lake, a wide mouth mason. Definitely put it in a wide mouth mason. So, I'm going to divide the beef between the 2 jars. There we go. Next in, some diced turnip. And so there's the next question for my Australian viewers. In Canadian cookbooks, going back as far back as I have them anyway, the word turnip is used interchangeably between 2 related yet distinctly different root vegetables. True turnip, which is white like this, or something that is also, or the alternative, which is called rutabaga or Swede or neep. And it has more of an orangey yellow flesh, and it's a hybrid of a couple of other different types of brassicas. It's something that gets me in trouble when I do early Scottish cookbooks. So the orange fleshed version, the orangey yellow fleshed version, which is a rutabaga or a Swede or a neep or a Swedish turnip, doesn't show up in Scotland until the 1790s, and then isn't widely adopted until the early 1810s. By 1810, everybody's eating it because it's a bigger root vegetable, it's just as easy to grow, and it stores better. And so any recipe that had previously called for a turnip, which is the white, so if you're viewing a recipe from a Scottish cookbook in the 1700s, they're asking for that, a white turnip. After that, pretty much everything that asks for turnip is they're putting in a Swede or a neep or a Swedish turnip or a rutabaga, depending on what you want to call it. But I don't know what the situation is in Australia in the 1920s. And you have to really sort of divorce yourself from what you think you know today in 2025 and get back into what was actually happening that long ago. And because the words are used so interchangeably, often it's really hard to sort of wiggle out what they're asking for. But in this case, because we're making such a small amount and it asked for half a turnip, and turnips are relatively small in comparison to a rutabaga, I chose the white turnip. Make sense? Let me know down below. Next in, diced carrot. So, put that on top. And then I've decided to put the onion in last. Same sort of thing, diced onion. Just to let the onion flavor flow down inside. I'm sure this is going to sort of bubble and boil inside the jar. I should probably do a longer video about rutabagas and turnips and tie it into a Scottish cookbook. Because people do get very angry about that sort of thing. Okay, so parchment paper. The recipe tells me to tie a piece of grease-proof paper. I believe it says grease-proof. Let's take a look. Tie a piece of strong greased paper over the top and put into a pan of cold water and place on the fire. Let come to a boil, then stew for 3 or 4 hours very gently. Serve hot, blah, blah, blah. Best way to cook is to put into a jar and cook slowly in the oven for 3 to 4 hours, standing in a dish of water. Bain-marie. So these glass lids I could put over top. I have rubber rings for these that when you're actually canning with them. We're not canning this. We're just cooking it in a jar. So safety Sally, take a step back. It's okay. I could put the rubber ring on it and that would sort of keep it all from, you want to keep the juices inside. You don't want to seal it because you do want the steam to escape a little bit, but you don't want too much steam to escape. So I'm going to cut this one in half. Let's see, cut it in half. And then crumple them up. There we go, just like that. Crumpling it just makes it more pliable and a little bit easier when you put it on top and then put the lid on like that. It's going to seal a little bit better. Okay, so Dutch oven. Any pot that you can put in the oven should work just fine. Any pot that you can put in the oven with a lid that you can put in the oven would probably work better. Put our jars into the pot and we'll take the pot over to the oven. Into a preheated oven, and I've got a kettle of hot water here. I'm using hot water just to kind of cut down on my cooking time a little bit. You could put in cold and just let the oven warm it gently. There we go. Lid on. So I've got the oven at 350. There's no temperature listed, just a time. You could do it at 325 probably. You could do it at 400 probably. The water is going to moderate the heat quite a bit. You could do it with the lid off. If you don't have a container with a lid, you could just do it in a roasting pan filled with water, a bain-marie, and just over the 3 or 4 hours that it's cooking, top up the water as needed. And if you're doing that method, definitely, if you're topping up the water, top it up with hot water so that you don't bring the temperature down so that it has to come back up again. I'm going to leave that go until Julie gets home from work. Okay, so about 4 hours.
4 hours?
Hey, Jules.
Hey, friends. Hey, Glenn. I'm fascinated about those layered jars.
Yes, yes. Let's see.
That's amazing.
Okay.
Is that a stirred up like a bibimbap, or is that, eating like a shepherd's pie all flat and...
It's from an Australian cookbook, and it's called Brazilian stew.
Okay. Looks like something you would cook camping.
Well, that's the thing. I mean, you could, if you did it in a mason jar, you could put everything in there, close it, freeze it, cool it, whatever it is, take it camping, and then just cook it in a Dutch oven when you're camping.
Yeah.
Or you could cook it in a mason jar and take it to work the next day and just open the lid and heat it in the microwave, and so it could already be cooked. I don't know. So it says,
you don't just eat it from the jar?
The recipe says,
oh, it's going to be like this. There's your sauce.
Oh, what a mess. Okay.
I thought it would have been a nice stacked pile. Your disappointed face tells me that was supposed to be a nice little tower of food.
I suppose Heston Blumenthal would have made that look beautiful.
I am sure it doesn't matter. It's going to still taste fine.
Oh.
There you go.
Maybe a fork.
I was going to say, wait, I'm going to stick with my spoon because I have one.
Okay.
Did you add liquid to it?
You add a dessert spoonful of vinegar and a dessert spoonful of sauce. But it doesn't say what kind of sauce. So I thought Commonwealth HP.
Okay. I was expecting the Vegemite.
Well, I think the Vegemite would probably work really well. So
There's a lot of liquid in there.
there's a lot of liquid that comes from the vegetables. I guess the
HB is a good choice, though. It's got a nice tang to it. I guess that's the vinegar, too. It's pretty nice.
dice up some potato, ramp up the flavors a little bit. That's one of the things about today. Flavor profiles and spiciness have gone like this over time, and I think
Yes.
we're now
Ridiculous in certain instances.
in certain but I think that
That has a great base flavor.
Yeah.
I think if you didn't do anything to it, it's fine. Mm-hmm. And I think you could add, even like parsley or something like that to it. Would just,
that's it. You've got it's a stew cooked in individual containers. It's kind of cool.
I really like the vinegar in it, actually.
Yeah.
I really like the way that just adds a little something. Maybe I'd add a little less. Although I don't think you added that much. I think there's just a lot of liquid in your vegetables.
Well, yeah, between the carrots, onions, and the turnip, they gave off a lot of water. So maybe it didn't need to be sealed as tightly as I sealed it. You could have allowed a little bit to bubble off.
What? It doesn't have exact... what are you saying? Your recipe book didn't give you...
No.
That's okay. That's still really good.
But it is cooked this way. It's very much a put it in the oven and completely forget about it for 5-6 hours.
That's my kind of cooking.
So it's just before 6 o'clock now. I put it on at 1:30.
At like what?
At 350.
Okay, I was going to guess.
You could cook it. You could cook it at a lower temperature, definitely. Add some flavors, some different root vegetables. Maybe a little bit of thickener in there just to kind of bring the gravy or the sauce together a little bit more. That's a great starting place. A great base, and it's out there probably in lots of different places. Tell me about Brazilian stew. So if you're from Australia, tell me about Brazilian stew. Tell me about turnips versus rutabagas.
Oh my goodness, not the turnips versus rutabagas. Did he talk about that?
And sauce. Tell me.
What is sauce?
What is it, in 1920 whatever, was sauce HP sauce, or did I miss something completely? Thanks for stopping by. See you again soon.